Like you, I was taught to go to school, get good grades, find a good career, and find financial stability. But eventually I learned from success and wealth experts that following this path would just make me a loser, and that entrepreneurship was the only way out. Well, after 15 years of both failure and success in entrepreneurship, I've realized that that's just one big lie. The truth is that 99% of people shouldn't actually be following typical success and wealth advice, and in this video, I'm going to show you what you should do instead. And it all starts with understanding what's wrong with this kind of advice in the first place. Our mass social media addiction has given way to a flood of wealth and success content, and it attracts us for the same exact reason social media itself does. Influencers promising fast money with no work give us that rush of dopamine, and even among the ones who do tell us it's gonna be a ton of work, they're still hell-bent on convincing us that building a business, investing, etc. are the only true paths to success. And if we don't follow it, we'll just become worthless and unimportant. As a result, the advice they give about success ends up being relevant only to about 1% of people, with the other 99% just getting left behind. In other words, they're completely out of touch. To illustrate this, let me ask you a serious question. Would you be willing to eat ramen 3 times a day and sleep on a cold floor or live out of your car for a few years? Would you be willing to skip meals, skip social get-togethers, work 24/7 for at least 3 to 5 years, and suffer catastrophic losses, disappointment, and failure? For my friends out there who answered yes, I'm with you actually, but we're a whole different level of crazy. For the rest of you who answered no, that's totally okay, because that's the real path of entrepreneurship. And once we get past the glamour of Lamborghinis and mansions, if most of us are really real with ourselves, this isn't a path most of us truly want to walk. In the first place, traditional success and wealth advice has created a false dilemma, as if there were only 2 options. Should I be an entrepreneur or should I follow a career path? But how about if you want to be a backpacker full-time and travel the world? What if you want to be an artist or a writer? What if you want to become a monk, do charity work, become an Olympic athlete, or you want to be president of the United States? I mean, there are so many other paths available other than the 2 we've been traditionally presented with. So then what kind of success advice should we follow in order to make the right decisions? Well, it's all about using 3 key principles, the first of which is to identify trigger points. At the end of the day, we have to find something from our life experience that pulls us. One of those experiences for me was my memory of my grandmother. You see, my grandmother was an amazing person. She was the typical Italian grandmother, and she was intelligent, loving, and wasn't the most positive person in the world, but the way she expressed her negativity was almost hilarious and always left you with some important lesson. But she never truly got to maximize the intelligence she clearly had. And I also witnessed the gradual decline of her health. The older she got, the more time she spent in her reclining chair at home in front of the TV, and the less and less control she had over the use of her legs. She developed neuropathy in her legs over time, struggled with heart failure and obesity, and eventually, after she became too much for my aunt and grandfather to handle, she went from her own home to a nursing home. For the remaining 10 years of her life, I saw this intelligent, loving, amazing woman spend most of her time confined to a bed. But it didn't have to end up that way. There were so many lifestyle factors that could have prevented this. And it was this experience alone that made me realize, 1, I never want to end up in this situation, and 2, I never want to waste my potential. Every time I think about skipping the gym, I think of her. Every time I want to have a few too many drinks, I think of her. And every time my lazy ass starts to scroll on TikTok when I know I should be reading a book or working on my goals, I think of her. And not because I think badly about my grandmother, but because I believe that her situation in life was tragic and that her beautiful life never truly reached its full potential. If you really take time to reflect, I'm sure you've had experiences in your own life that make it crystal clear what you value, even though you might not have thought about them for a while. But you don't have to meditate on it or go to a spa retreat or attend a wealth seminar to figure it out. What was that experience for you, and what did it teach you about your own purpose and potential? potential. Those experiences that have brought out in us the deepest and most gripping emotions are the first place we need to look in order to define what success looks like for us, not some gurus who don't even care whether we exist. So what does success look like for you? When I first read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and Cash Flow Quadrant, two books by the finance guru Robert Kiyosaki, I felt like someone was finally speaking my language. It's a language we hear all the time among those who talk about wealth and finance. He talked about how I would never be wealthy if I didn't get rid of my employee mindset. He talked about how I needed to build a big business and eventually become an investor. He talked about how I should stop accepting the idea of being paid a certain fixed amount of money for a fixed amount of time. He talked about how I should use my money to buy assets I can get returns from. And there was a simple reason these ideas spoke to me. You see, ever since I was in my undergrad and discovered philosophy and history and the sciences and made friends with others who loved these topics too, I came to the realization, wow, I love this lifestyle so much. I want to just spend all my time having intellectual conversations all the time and contributing to these fields in some way. From that instant on, the employee mindset in me was already destroyed. I had determined then and there that I would never go to a cubicle every day, clock in and clock out, and work for a boss. For me, any time not spent focused on those academic topics I loved was wasted time. So when I finally found the world of entrepreneurship, or it found me, I was immediately sold on it. For me, I would do anything to make that lifestyle a reality. Working overnight minimum wage jobs so I could build my business during the day, struggling to afford a $400 rent, going through all those low points, it was all worth it in my mind to live the lifestyle I dreamed about. Which brings us to our next success principle, which is commit to excellence. Key question for you. What are you willing to suffer for? Now, I don't mean meaningless suffering like, oh, just make yourself suffer for the sake of it so you can feel romantic or virtue signal or something. What I mean is this. Although Kiyosaki and others are wrong to imply that the absolute best or right path in life is entrepreneurship, we should at least all take the spirit of entrepreneurship, or really whatever you want to call it, into what we're pursuing. In other words, what can you identify in your life not only that you feel intensely passionate about, but which deep down you feel is so right, so correct, which you feel truly must be done, that you would be willing to feel intensely uncomfortable for, at least for a set period of time. That's the essence of excellence, no matter what path we choose to take. This way of thinking about our lives is not only much more inclusive, but also much more in touch with the reality of life for 99% of people. If you truly believe you're called to become a backpacker, traveling the world on a tight budget, then are you willing to work all the odd jobs it takes, or use up all your savings, or maybe even live off the land? If you truly believe you're called to become a political leader or a community leader, are you willing to suffer through all the course of study it'll take, all the long hours, all the hard conversations, and all the research you'll have to do? If you constantly believe you're called to be an athlete, are you prepared to train every day, multiple hours per day, suffer disappointment and setbacks, and discipline your diet? These are just a few examples, but if we're not willing to endure discomfort and suffering in life, then the result is still suffering, just a different kind. Back when I worked in charter schools in Harlem, preparing them for college entrance exams, I knew statistically that much of the class would not achieve a high enough score to get into college. But I also knew that for those who were able to achieve a high enough score, getting into college would be one of the best opportunities of their lifetime. Contrast that with much of what we've heard from finance gurus, whether that's people like Tai Lopez or Graham Stephan or whoever. One of the biggest lies we're told is that school is not a pathway to success. But tell that to all the children for whom the alternative is continued poverty. At the end of the day, getting a job that pays you $40,000 to $50,000 per year and having the stability to open up even more opportunities from there if they wish is for sure a huge success. Is college for everyone? No. Should some of those students become entrepreneurs and be encouraged to become entrepreneurs? Yes. Should all of them or most of them be? No. Because the reality is that what Robert Kiyosaki did and what Graham Stephan did and what Gary Vee did or what Alex Hormozi did simply is not something that most people are willing to replicate. But should most people just be hung out to dry and basically be told, oh well, go be poor then because of this? I do believe pretty much everyone is capable of achieving the results those gurus have achieved. But is it something they must do, that they're pulled to do, that they're called to do? do. Along with the 2 success principles we've discussed, namely identifying trigger points in our lives and committing to excellence, we have to incorporate the 3rd principle here to identify our income preference. Now, I use the term income preference here, but it's less of a preference and more simply a matter of identifying an income strategy that follows logically from principles 1 and 2 we've discussed. We do have to face some material realities. At some point, we will all need some passive income, and throughout our lives, we will need financial literacy. Big banks and financial institutions take advantage of people who don't have financial literacy. Take a look at the student loan crisis in the US, for example. Now, financial literacy isn't the only reason for this crisis, but it certainly doesn't help to not understand the difference between fixed rate interest versus variable rate interest as an 18-year-old taking out the equivalent of a mortgage. Take a look also at marketing and advertising. It's the sole goal of companies to get you to spend more. And trust me, they're always devising ways to outsmart you. Isn't it a good idea then to develop in ourselves the skill of managing a budget, sticking to it, and teaching others to do the same? So whether we want to be an artist or an astronaut, financial literacy is for sure an important ingredient for success. And so is passive income, but not in the way most financial gurus describe it. To earn passive income, we either need a lot of time or a lot of money or both. I love building passive income by building businesses, but if a 9-to-5 job or alternative career is your thing, then investing a few $100s over 30 to 40 years can create a pretty sizable passive income if you do that in the S&P 500, for example. So can finding a few small rental properties, or even just joining a union and getting a good pension from that. None of those fit my income strategy, but why the heck should that matter to you? Live your own life and stop taking advice from people who could care less about you. When it comes to success advice, it should be practical and easily applied to most people's lives, not just to 1% of people. How do you see the 3 principles we covered playing out in your own life? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you want to keep learning how to use your critical thinking to live a life of impact, then be sure to watch this next video.